Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Bard Inn. I'm Phil Rice, your host, guest, yeah, something like that. Fire out. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I have a wonderful group of guests, and we've got some cool topics. But I also want to encourage everyone in the chat to please put your questions in, and we'll get towards them. Get to the questions towards a little bit later in the show. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. It's wonderful to be back here towards the end of the year at the change of the season, and I can't wait to sort of just hang out with some friends and colleagues here and do our best to help you guys out with your journey and your path with these questions. So I'm going to start bringing some people in. So let's have a look here. Okay, let's bring in Armand and Didi from Chi Skills. Hello, Didi and Armand. How are you both?
Hello.
Very well, Phil. Thank you. Thank you for having us. And how about yourself? You're doing well?
Well, I'm a box of fluffy ducks, thank you. And
Perfect.
And it's so wonderful to have you here. Can you give us a quick nutshell about what's been happening over? You're in Holland at the moment.
Yes, Netherlands, absolutely, and in Holland, which is correct, which is a province of the Netherlands. But
That's good to know. Okay.
Yeah, little detail here.
Geography, yeah. No, we've been doing well. We had a great summer season. Done quite a few workshops.
Yep.
We've been working on our unique system.
Yep.
Our own system. Working on a new website. So it's kind of all building up to new things.
Like a 2.0.
Yeah.
And we've been introducing the private mentoring programs from the beginning of the year, which have proven very successful. We're fully booked at the moment, and that's all really nice, getting that sort of engagement with people and taking them, guiding them through the material and their things that they want to work on and their challenges, etc. So it's been a very, very good year so far. Yeah, very grateful.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear, and it's so cool to hear, this constant development. Striving towards upgrading things and refining and reviewing and that sort of that development cycle. It's really lovely to hear that, actually, because this is for me is one of the most exciting parts of all of this is innovation and discovering new ways of doing things. So great to have you guys here. Thank you so much. I'm going to bring on Mr. Bob Smith from 60 Skills. Hello, Bob. How are you, sir?
Very, very well. How are you doing?
Well, I'm so good I wouldn't even know where to start. And what's been happening in the land of 60 Skills?
Just as with Didi and Armand, the tour season last year was a success. So we'll have the new schedule out here starting in mid-February shortly, so people can check that out. There'll be the basic course and then an advanced course. The basic course is pretty standard. The advanced course will be a bit more eclectic, depending upon who shows up and what material they've worked through. Development for the Zodiac course is coming apace, and there'll be some very interesting videos coming out on Tibetan-style pranayama and the iron triangle exercises for evocation. So, yeah, man, it's good times. Good times.
That's great. And this is obviously, has this been the first year of the Magic Camp?
Yeah, this was the first year. I actually was going to wait until this year to do it the first time, but students started calling me, and they were like, hey, we want to get together. And I'm like, well, let's see if it works. And it did. So there'll be events in Mexico, the U.S., Spain, or Portugal. We're unclear right now which location we're going to use, because we've got this really fantastic location in north central Spain that's got a castle in the background and these huge fields to wander through, and it's in a semi-abandoned township that we can kind of run amok in. So it's a pretty cool place. And we're going to try to do some Asia events this year. Didn't quite work out the way we wanted to last year. It'll probably be Bali or Thailand. because Lao, it worked. I mean, the event went off without any kind of problem, but the size of the houses we need and kind of the other things that come along with that weren't ideal. So unfortunately, we probably won't be doing that again, even though if you want empty temples to practice in, Lao is a very good place to go do that, just for what it's worth.
Good to know.
There you go. There you go.
Awesome. Thanks. And I think too that, after, I did years of throwing events, and I certainly got much better at it, because it's like you discover what works, what doesn't, and what's important, and what sets up for what's the best way to set it up for the actual kind of gig you're throwing. So I totally hear you there. All right, let's bring on James. Thank you, Bob. Bring on James from Perseus. Hello, brother James. Wonderful to have you here, sir. Are you doing well?
Hello, Phil. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Great to be here. I'll ask the traditional question. How are you, Phil?
Okay, I've got another one. I'm so good. I'm jumping around inside and bouncing off the walls. There we go.
There you go. Yeah.
So Perseus has been pretty busy this year too. You guys have started up a new community portal. I must admit, I've been a bit bad. I haven't been in there as much as I would have liked to, but I have been in, and it's looking pretty good. You're getting a fair bit of traffic in there?
Yeah, the community it's slow burn because people kind of used to the communities they're already in Discord or whatever. But slowly, we're getting people over. Just so we can basically have a place that's our own, and we don't have to worry about changes in policy and this and that, and we can post what we like. It's nice, and we're adding features as we go, and trying to make it so you can do everything in there. Eventually, everything we do on Perseus will be on that platform, just so that we can actually control it, and if we need something new, we can actually just make it and add it on.
Oh, great. Yeah. I think that's where it's at. This is one of the reasons why I'm enjoying Substack is because it's just so fresh and new and doesn't have all of the bloat and the baggage that these big platforms have slowly accumulated over time. There's a feel of being able to just to sort of openly express and and I think that with the amount of choices of platforms, having something central for the teachers too, where everyone can sort of see what's going on, I think that's great, because it's very easy to get sort of spread out over so many things nowadays.
Well, that's it. We're trying to bring everything into one place, and where we can have coaching, where we can have one-on-one chats between teacher and student. We can have group chats, the whole thing, so that there's people don't get left behind. People don't think, well, I don't like that platform, I don't use it, I'm not going to go there. Whereas if this is specifically, the barriers to entry are very low. When they do their course, they're already in the same platform as the community. It just makes things a lot easier.
Oh, that's so cool. All right. And we'll definitely do some plugs towards the end as well to get some eyes on all these wonderful new initiatives and goodies that people can go and explore and have an interaction with. So, guys, what I'm going to do first is that I want to say thank you, everyone in the chat, for joining us again. Please put your questions in there, and we'll wait till we get a few questions in a little bit of time. I've got some questions to put up on the screen for the guests, and I guess where I'd really love to start is because we're kind of, in the Southern Hemisphere, we're actually just coming into our summertime, and I'm pretty sure that all the rest of the guests are all heading into the cooler seasons. And so you've been doing a bunch of, you guys have been doing travel, you guys have been doing your own sorts of events and things, in-person type things, as well as online things. But one thing that I was thinking about while putting together the questions for this particular podcast or this live panel was, what haven't we talked about yet? And that would be useful for people, especially if they're looking at planning ahead for next year. And one of those things was meditation retreats and essentially in-person events. And so obviously, we've talked about sort of group learning. And then there's also this idea of isolation. I mean, we can go a bunch of places with this, but what I'll do is I'll start with this question, and I'll start with Didi and Armand. what makes meditation retreats worthwhile? And have you got any suggestions or hot tips for people who are thinking about exploring a meditation retreat?
Meditation retreats. Well, actually never been to a meditation retreat and never done any. So if we can make it a little broader, like the workshops that we do, then I can talk about that.
Yeah, it's
It's,
probably the same type of thing. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
what I'm
I was thinking the same, but you're taking it pretty literal. But yeah,
yeah.
but
I
of
would,
course, yeah.
yeah. If it's the same, yeah. So what we in the summer we do these 5-day workshops, and what makes them worthwhile is like, okay, you have these intense 5 days, and your skills can go from here to there. So you have this, and also because you're in what we do is like with 4 people, with
Max,
just
yeah.
max 4 people. It's a small group, but still a group where you learn from the other people. You have very much one-on-one contact with us.
It's almost
So,
private mentoring,
yeah.
level, what we're doing. So
Yeah.
you can really correct people because you put a force on them time and time and time again, right? So day one is like, whoa. Day two, they're getting into the structure,
Yeah.
and of course there's
Yeah.
there's this thing that when you go into the transformations and you start doing these together, you do the first transformation, second transformations, all that stuff. When you're in a group, in a room together, it's just it amplifies everything. So people can take that home, that experience, and then it's sort of it can really help you fast track some of
Yeah.
these skills. That can be very hard to
Yeah.
develop on your own to a certain level. And I had the same experiences when I was learning these things. Is that you can take it to a certain level that you can just continue on when you get home. You really have a feeling of like, okay, this is where I am now, and I can boost that. So I think
Yeah.
you just get great results with that.
Yeah, it's also when you're here in or any, well, then we call it meditation retreat. If you're there in person, you can have corrections made in person, as where if sometimes online it's also possible. I mean, you can do a lot online, but being there in person, it's just a different feeling as well. So.
Yeah, and it's also the in-between things, right? In between the teaching, it's like the questions that people ask, like, can you, it's more like the personal stuff that can come up in that way. Yeah. Everyone has their own unique motivation for why they're doing this. So that makes it worthwhile as well. It's also like we share meals together. It's very home. It's like literally in our home, right? This is where we do it. So. And that just really, really helps to take that to a next level.
What I do want to add, what I see sometimes happen, and if this was especially when we first started, is that people come over just for 5 days, then they leave, and then it's up to them to, continue or to do something else. And you see sometimes people, every year they do different ones, and which is great. So every time you learn things, but this year it was quite a few from the people who did private mentoring with us. They came over and did, and now you still have that continuation. So they have this intense 5 days, they grow, but then the week after you still see them and you continue your journey together. So that was something that I sometimes miss when people just fly in, they jump in, they grow, and then they jump out and you don't see them again. It's like that was something that we were like, okay, sometimes you just want to hold on to them a little longer to see where they can actually go, instead of, okay, you got to here and there's so much more, but now we have to say goodbye and maybe see each other another year. So
that can be part of it too. Yeah, that people, just, I think some people are there also. When I look into the field a bit, they go from workshop to workshop, from a retreat to retreat, right? And that can be helpful, but there's also people that just are on this path, where like, okay, I go to that workshop, but I do the private mentoring as well. So they build up what you have to offer over a longer period. So it's more a part of the journey that they have with us for maybe a year or maybe a couple of years. So, and we see that last version more and more now happening. So, yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, I think this is something that I'm sure many teachers would have come across is that, when you have a long duration, multi-day, highly immersive sort of learning experience with an environment that's been sort of set up to be conducive to certain kinds of outcomes or more favorable, everything sort of pointing towards these kinds of outcomes. There's a real value in that. And it's great that there's more sorts of, available workshops where people can have in-person experiences. And one of the reasons for this particular question is that I am aware that there are sort of retreats available. We have a Vipassana retreat available north here of where I live, and I haven't sort of taken advantage of it yet. And so I was just thinking about how to refine this question a bit so it's, something that everyone can comment on. This idea of either being in isolation or being in a group, the chance to spend time by yourself at the exclusion of all else, or, taking advantage of the group situation. Bob, I'd love to hear, we've talked about this on some of the conversations before about the value of group learning. But yeah, I mean, anything you would like to add on this sort of broader version of the question?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the 80-20 rule works really well with us. 80% of your time, you're going to be on your own, doing drills, working on individual skills, all that kind of stuff. But that other 20% can really be broken down into a practical aspect and more of a subtle aspect. So on a practical basis, body training, all these physical drills, like Armand and Didi were saying, if you don't have somebody there to correct that stuff, yeah, you can do it 10,000 times the wrong way really easily. So there's definitely that aspect of it. There's the aspect that when you're dealing with subtle energy, the astral and mental stuff can go worldwide very quickly. But that etheric energy, that near physical, vital kind of energy, that stuff really only goes about 10 or 15 meters. And so, like when I'm doing my weekend courses, they're great at an astral and mental level, but that visceral, near physical energy is missing.
Amen. Yeah.
And when you get 4, 10, 15, 20 people together who are all doing this kind of work at the same time, you get a much more potent effect in the localized area than you're going to on your own, unless something really strange happens and you've done a lot of ritual and blah, 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 blah. And this is the reason why lodge work is so popular, because you get 20 people together, even if only one guy really knows what he's doing, he can lead that group and you can get some really interesting effects. Now, on the more subtle end, there's the whole egregore and sense of community thing. A lot of these people spend a lot of time by themselves when they work on this. They don't know people locally who do this kind of thing. So just being around other people is really nice. That's why when I do my events, I try to get everybody to stay on site, because, there's the 8 or 10 hours we teach during the day. But honestly, to me, the more important part is what actually happens outside of that. Which is why I encourage my students to self-organize and have their own practice groups and all this other kind of business so they can get better at what they're doing. But more importantly, having a sense of community, having somebody to talk to go, hey, I did this and this happened. What about you? It's like on the Discord server right now, one of the most valuable things we have on the letter magic one for Kabbalah is I'm having students place field reports. I worked with this letter. I worked with this letter combination. This is what happened. So if you get 5 or 10 people who are all saying the same thing, okay, now you can start to draw some conclusions regarding what's going on. Whereas if you're just reading the book sometimes this is confusing or things get left out.
Hmm.
So, yeah, man, the most of your developmental work you're going to do on your own. That's just a practical thing. But that other 20% you get from working with other people in many ways is what makes it worthwhile. And I think a lot of people from a more, I don't want to say traditional is quite right, but from this viewpoint of I do all of this on my own kind of background, man, they really miss out on a lot on that. And to be honest with you, the rebounding training, that's part of what you guys do, Didi and Armand.
Yeah.
That is the fastest way to train the body, period.
Yep.
Bar none.
Yep.
But you got to have friends to do that with.
Hmm.
You can't do that on your own. And, it's what it is. Nah, man, it's like 80-20. Pretty good rule. All the individual abilities, you just got to grind through that stuff. But that other 20%, man, that's the part that makes it worthwhile. And for what it's worth, I've never met anybody who was dying who said they wanted to spend more time by themselves. It was always about
Wow.
their kids or their friends or what they did with another group of people. That's what they remember.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, wonderful. Thank you for that. Yeah, some things are most definitely better with friends. And I think that's something that's really one of the reasons why I really got interested in Mark Rasmus's work and how his stuff just came across me is that people are bouncing each other around and like with a purpose. They're not just, doing it for the sake of bouncing, although I'm sure, it's good fun too, right? But it's like, when everyone's having interesting experiences together, it just adds to the gestalt or the ambience of the situation. And it's like you said, I think there's this exponential sort of effect that happens in physical proximity. It's the same as when I've tried to teach guitar online years ago. Like you can do it, but when I realized at the end of it all that I was actually teaching these students guitar tai chi because I was adjusting posture and helping them relax, just helping students relax, like make sure they carry on breathing, like because some of them withhold their breath, these kinds of things. Armand, I know you're probably aware what I'm talking about here.
Yeah.
Once they relax, then their natural expression comes forth and then more progress just happens. And very hard to sort of get that effect through a screen. But thank you for that, Bob. Now, James, I know you've done a bit of travel and you've done a couple of things and worked with a few teachers and a few groups and things like this. And like I said, meditation retreats, we can broaden that term a little. Have you got any comments on the topic here?
Yeah, I mean, to mirror what everyone else has said here, absolutely in-person training in regards to the kind of things we're doing here in Hermetics. I mean, a day with someone with experience can clarify 2 or 3 years of questioning yourself. That's all you need these checkpoints to kind of point you in the right direction because you're spending so much time and energy. Am I getting it right? Am I doing this right? Or you're confidently wrong, going in the wrong direction. So in that regard, super important. And of course, just to find other people like ourselves, because often we're the outlier of certain groups because we do this stuff. So it's nice to meet other people that do these things. But for myself, in people or events that I've gone to, I mean, I would make a distinction between events and retreats. A retreat I would go to and expect to spend a lot of time doing the work with very little input, especially in Asia. The ones I've done in Asia or the practices is that you're there to do what you wouldn't do at home in the ones that I've been at. You're there to do 8 to 10 hours a day of sitting, things that you would never be able to do maybe at home with a family and a job. So you make quite tremendous breakthroughs very quickly and quite powerfully. It's like you see people go to the Vipassana retreats and, 10 days at the volume they're doing, people have quite powerful effects positively and negatively from those things. So for a retreat, you should expect to do a lot of work, and as a result of that, you can make some great progress. And I think that's what I see the biggest thing for retreats is that, it's the time, because a lot of this stuff, we can be as clever as we want and we can have all the methods we want, but it just takes a lot of work. You've got to do the work. You can know all the secrets, but if you don't, if you don't do it, then it's pointless. So these give you an opportunity to really grind and do what at home you might think, I'll do a cup of coffee now and then I'll do a bit more later. Whereas you don't get a chance, particularly at the ones like in Taiwan where we used to live. You were on the mat and that was it. You were there for the next couple of hours and you often didn't know when it would end. So this whole thinking ahead, when's it going to end? You have to let it all go, and just be in it. So these are all, I think, really valuable lessons. And in terms of, back to the Hermetics, like I said, I trained for a couple of years on my own. Then I went to see Mark Rasmus in 2012. And in 5 days, I gained clarity on everything. And I was like, oh, okay, it doesn't need to take 25 years. It can actually be done far more efficiently. So, if only to give yourself the clarity that this is achievable. And because you see everyone else achieving these things, very, very, very worthwhile to see as many legitimate teachers as you can.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, it just keeps coming back to this. I think when you're exposing yourself to essentially new forces, because even though techniques, principles can appear largely similar at the base level, when they're sort of taught through the lenses of various teachers, there's other sort of colorings or lenses or whatever we might call that at play. And so, you can have 5 people lined up and they can all give you the same piece of information in their own unique style. But for some reason, one particular person in that group really got it through, even though they might be speaking the same words verbatim. But they have something in their personality or something in their style and their character that allows for that information to sort of actually take hold and for you to benefit from. And I think, this is one of the reasons why I quite enjoy this kind of event is that, we have a variety of teachers. Essentially, we're all teaching or sharing some very similar things, but we're doing it through our own sort of unique style and lens. And so once again, thank you all so much for joining me here. And everyone in the chat, thanks, guys. It's lovely to see. We've got a few more people starting to show up here. Please enter your questions into the chat. And we will get to them. What's the time? We'll probably get to some questions in about another 20 minutes. And then we've got another guest to bring in. One goes out, one goes in. And let's move along here to another question. Okay. Okay, here's one here. So okay, I'm going to give this one to Bob first. Bob, how have your motivations for practice changed over time?
I'd say substantially in regards to 3 distinct phases. When I first got involved with this, it was about getting control of the Kundalini process because I went through that when I was quite young. That was very uncomfortable. Then that morphed into getting the spirit world to leave me the hell alone. That was like phase 2. And then phase 3 basically centered on Barden's mandala from the cover of the 3rd book. Even though when I started that process 5 years ago, we didn't really know what we were doing. It was just as we would consecutively finish the letters that led into the planets, and then that led into the outer planets, and then that led into the zodiac, and then finally into the Sephiroth. It was like opening a series of locks. And it wasn't until, I'd say probably halfway through the zodiac that we kind of began to figure out, all right, where is this going? whereas previously it had simply been a process of exploration, if that makes any sense.
Hmm.
And that's about as philosophical as I like to get with any of this, by the way. As many people know, I view the process as being exceedingly mechanical. It's very much engineering, and you do A and you get B. Depending upon your physiology, practice, and lifestyle habits, it might take a little longer. Some of us can deadlift 250 kilos with a minimum of training, and some of the rest of us, that might take 5 or 6 years, because of how we're built and lifestyle and all that other kind of stuff. But ultimately, the techniques you use to get there are exactly the same. It just might be a little easier for one guy or gal than another. So that's pretty much it. Oh, and of course, along the way, creating a way of doing this that doesn't take 30 years the way it did for me, to where a person who's willing to put the work in, as James said, can do this in 3 or 4, to be completely honest with you. And that's ultimately probably going to be the legacy more than anything else, is just taking really bad pedagogy, fixing that so that it's practical for someone to do this and still have something left over for the rest of their life.
Hmm.
Versus spending decades just trying to figure out what's going on in order to do it at all. I've used an example before, and this will be the last thing I'll say about this, but the major problem the esoteric community has is we're continually reinventing algebra every generation.
Hmm.
And because we're not willing to share, and we're not willing to talk to each other, and we're not willing to write things down bereft of philosophy, focusing on instead how to do it, we reinvent algebra every generation, but we never get to calculus. I'm trying to at least get the algebra into a forum where you can learn it relatively quickly in a couple of years. So maybe somebody does eventually get to calculus. But that's my main long-term goal at this point.
Wonderful, thank you. And I have a personal sort of interest in that term pedagogy, coming from a background as being a teacher, because the opportunity for creative teaching within, if we just look at Barton's book and look at that series of exercises, and then we look at what other teachers have brought to it, and then all of the width of opportunity to explain those fingers pointing at the moon in 100 different ways, there's a real opportunity for creativity to unfold. And I've actually got a question about that as well. But one thing I love is that, is teachers being forced to be creative, say on their YouTube channels, and come up with new ways of explaining similar things. I mean, as a teacher of music, I had to repeat myself a lot, and I had to make it interesting for myself as well, and come up with new ways of saying the same thing, so that, there are some things that had to be reinforced. And I think that, if you only get a chance to write one book, actually, that would be a great question. I might have to note that one down. If you only had a chance to write one book, how would you play it? Because I kind of feel Barton probably had the same thing. He's like, I'm probably only going to be able to write one book, so I need to make a way that's going to be, okay, not too much ambiguity. I'm going to keep it all on track. Okay. James, now, how have your motivations for practice changed over time?
Well, I think for me, the goal originally was just to find the material, right? The great search that we all go on. It's a lot easier these days, but back in those days, that was travel. That was, as one of my kung fu friends said, kissing a lot of frogs in terms of teachers, and going down a lot of rabbit holes, to find that these teachers were possibly not what they made themselves out to be.
Yeah.
And also, I think as well, over time, my idea of what a teacher is and what a teacher can do for you and what they, more importantly, can't do for you has changed. So yeah, first of all, it was finding the material, and I remember very clearly when I found Bardens, it was after I had just left the UK, which was also in accordance with leaving another teacher. So I was like, I've had enough of this. I'm out of here. Um, and basically, then I found Bardens, and I was like, oh, thank God. I just now the only limit to what I can do is what I do. It's not my nightmare was that the material was always held very tightly by the teacher, feeding you a little bit over the decades, and that you would never get the full picture. That was always my concern. It's like you don't want to invest yourself in some material and you can never get the full package, which is very much the way things are done traditionally, and which is why I've gone from being very traditional to very kind of anti-traditional, because I've seen so many teachers paying for their kids' education and their second house by stringing the students along. If it takes longer for you to do that practice than it does for you to get a medical degree, something's going wrong somewhere. It shouldn't take you that long. So it's either you or the material, the way it's taught. So yeah, my motivation, first of all, was to find it. Then it was to achieve it. I suppose going back to my original, fears when I first went into the Buddhism, that was I must escape samsara. It was if I don't do anything else, I've got to do this. And so I was all consumed in practice, and I'm probably completely imbalanced, consumed in practice. And now I'm probably, now I'm I get the same amount of practice done, but without that anxiety of having to do the practice. So now my motivation for practice is to make it as efficient as possible, and also to try and help people not make the same mistakes I made, in regards to the waste of time, in regards to the in regards to allowing teachers to kind of interfere in your I think a teacher should, like a gardener, should help, prune, but stay out the way, which is why I loved Mark Rasmus so much, because he cleanly presented the material and there was nothing of Mark there. It was just the material, and he only wanted the best for you. So I kind of took that on as my template for Perseus as well, so that teachers that we have on Perseus are people that I feel first and foremost truly have the best interest of the student at heart. It's got to be number one. And so my motivation now is to kind of, through Perseus, put out more efficient means for people to get, I'm already seeing people like they're in various teachers' courses who've done what I've done in 25 odd years, and they've done it in free. Oh my God, what am I doing? But it just shows when you have a clean path and people around you that want you to succeed, it can be done. Yeah. So these people are going to go way beyond where we are. So that's my motivation now: clean, clear paths for people to achieve what they can achieve with no interference, no obstacles from the teacher or the lineage.
Wonderful, thank you. And that speaks to my heart about just getting to it. Like it's not even so much that there's no time to waste. It's more like I find myself just like wanting to sort of separate the dross, because there is so much noise in the world, so many factions seeking to capture attention, and it's very pervasive. And so by focusing on just finding the best practices, that desire to do that particular thing there leaks over into other areas of life. Very helpful. It's almost like a concentration exercise. And motivations changing as you do the practices too has been something I've quite enjoyed discovering, because it's like some of these exercises are almost like vitamins that I didn't know, or nutrition that I didn't know I needed. And when I got it, I feel a relief or a sense of, oh, okay, I remember this thing. I've lost this thing. And now it's like once that's squared away, if you will, or you've got it back in the bag in the pocket, uh, new ideas of how you can express, create, and be in the world sort of come forward. And it's like, well, okay, before I was sort of wanting to do this, but now for whatever reason, I'll speculate, but now I want to focus more on this. And talking with all of the wonderful teachers that come on this podcast and sort of hearing their stories, one thing that comes true to me is that this is an ever evolving and unfolding process. And I think that's one of the reasons why, it remains to be continuously interesting, is that it's not one of these sort of same shit, different day kind of situations, like it's, things are evolving, they're constantly shifting, and uh, you know, it's great. It literally is that sort of unraveling adventure. But enough of me. Didi and Armand. Didi, I'd love to hear from you. How have your motivations for practice changed over time?
I think it just kind of started with, well, things that were going on in my life that I wanted to solve, that I wanted to, for me, and I've talked about that before, for me, kind of an entry point was also food. Because I actually, it was just after you started your Tai Chi. And I always had stomach aches. I mean, what's that to do with practice? But it kind of, when his teacher, he gave me a book on five element food, and that kind of started a whole journey for me. And of course, Armand came home from Tai Chi practice, and they were talking about um, the all the books and all the background stories and the Chinese. It actually made me go back to school, study traditional Chinese medicine. Armand, he got into well study with Rasmus, and so it kind of. But that was my first entry into practice for me. So it came out of, yeah, that something wasn't going well for me, and then it was just a search. And I have to say, it kind of sparked when I was 16. I went to Thailand for a year, and that brought me. I lived up north in Payao, as somewhere where nobody spoke English, only foreigner there. This was 95, 96. So it was kind of
Culture
a
shock.
culture shock. I said I've never been to a meditation retreat, but that was much as a meditation retreat as you can get, because I couldn't communicate with people. Like we had no common language, so it was quite something. But it got me in touch with Buddhism, got me into the Asian way. So moving forward, I think there was a spark there, and then my life just led me to living kind of going, find a job, doing the regular thing, and not feeling well. Um, yeah, and then looking for another path. And if I look at the motivation now, it's like I've come so far, but I feel like, oh, we are all power beings. We have all these abilities, and now I opened up these possibilities, and we're sharing, and I get more information from our students. From I read a lot of books, and I see like, oh, there's so much more out there. There's always more um, to know, but also to experience. And yeah, so I get really, I'm a really curious person, but it's also to see, okay, where am I in my life, and how can I make it better, better, better. And yeah, so
Wow.
In short, kind of. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. And Armand.
Well, yeah, my first motivation was just I was very desperate, you could say. I had to learn how to steer the rocket. I was just so much energy, but so up and down. And there was this sense of like I'm not being taught everything there is, right? I was like, there's so much more going on than people say. So I was very confused, you could say. And I was always drawn to the left where everyone was going to the right. But I felt lonely sometimes in that as well. I felt confused, etc. So then the first moment I saw Tai Chi in front of me, I was like, there's something going on here which can help me. I just sensed it. I just felt it. It's like and that got me into the training, and the motivation was there just to, I don't know. I mean that develops obviously, but the stillness, the focus I was searching for was in there. The now that I sort of recognized in it was like there's some deep things happening here, and I was so super lucky to that my first Tai Chi teacher was very, very genuine guy. It was mixed Tai Chi mixed with Kung Tao. So it was really, really rough, tough stuff, a very traditional coming from the south of China to Indonesia, from Indonesia to the Netherlands. Very obscure, very small group, very tight knit. But these were intellectuals as well. They would study. There were Chinese guys in there. They did, went to the university here. They studied with my teacher studied with Christopher Schipper for a while. He is a very famous Dutch Taoist who wrote a classic called it's a Taoist, the living religion of China. So there was not only that fighting art, there was this guy had rows of books, they spoke Chinese. So there was this learning. It was like university for me. I never went to university myself. I stopped after high school, you could say. The rest was self-taught in all sorts of ways. I didn't fare well in school. I fell out. I was like overboard. And, I was always drawn to the arts, like music. And I was drawn to martial arts and painting, expression in general. So when I was in that group, and I was in that for 11 years straight, they were like, like a small family. It was like 10 people max in that thing. The shift to wanting to know more about Taoism really started to happen. It's like, this is going to explain something for me. But it was also a bit abstract in a sense. I think culturally, maybe abstract too, to understand some of these things. Although, I got more and more experience with it. But then the most profound thing happened is that my teacher at a certain point said, I think you're done with me now. I cannot really help you anymore. But I know a guy. That was, by the way, that was the first thing that happened. It's like, I was never online, right? This was already, this like, I started in 2006 with him. And then up to 2017, I was never on YouTube watching anything. I was just doing his stuff. It was just in it. And there was no time for it. We're just always training. I would train the whole morning. I was teaching at night. I was a musician. So I had the benefit of having a lot of practice time. But then he recommended Mark Rosmus to me. And that was incredible. He's like, no, you guys go to Thailand every now and then. So, look him up. So I went online, wrote him an email. He was incredible. Right from the start, I was like, what is this? I was so like, and now it became real magic. So the thing is, I went from, sort of like desperation to going to training, getting into touch with myself again and having deeper understanding. And I fell into like, the best teacher you could imagine, right? I fell into his lap, you could say. I went over, started training with him. Now, all the stuff that was not clear yet, I think James said it very right. It's like in 5 days, it was very clear. It's like, oh, you mean that? Oh, you mean that? Oh, you mean that? It's like, I was so ready for it. I was so aligned and ready for it. So that came into me. And then from there, of course, I was already starting to teach locally. And then the whole shift started to happen. It's not only my training, but it's like you train for the benefit of others. And this is what I hear everyone say, right, in this group. It's like you start realizing that this is not tradition. The tradition is evolution. Tradition is evolution. So, and I started to realize, like, wait a minute, we've got something to offer here, and we can, so what I found out, and our unique combination as well, what we cut together, is just, yeah, it's going out there, and so, yeah, it goes from desperation, you could say, to, yeah, you could say, like, yeah, this journey, and it continues, right? It just keeps continuing. And I never stop training now. There's never a moment I don't train, because I live the practice, right? It's just, it's not that kind of practice per se. I mean, there's certain stuff that is a topic, you could say, but I live it, So, yeah. So that's sort of, this was not short, sorry, but yeah, sort of in a nutshell what I was trying to get across. Yeah.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, and I think too that stories and how we get to these situations are valuable, because if it's just dry information, if it's just dry data, sometimes it doesn't quite sort of get traction as good. So you're welcome to meander your way towards your to whatever we're saying, people, and thank you so much. Please do. And I think I know James has to disappear in about 10, so I'm going to throw this question at him next. But it sort of leads into a similar type of thing as like what Armand finished on there about there's something very, as a musician, like watching other people enjoy what I was doing was very satisfying. Whether I was a teacher or a player, play well, a performer. I'll say that word instead, because the other word's a bit loaded nowadays. But something that I think everyone here can comment on is what are some common pitfalls or traps for students? I think there's so much intellectual information out there that in itself can become a trap. But James, I just want to leave this one to you, because I know you oversee a lot of community chatter and talk to a lot of teachers. So I'd love to, hear you talk about this for a bit before we sort of part ways.
Gosh, where do I start? Yeah, I mean, it's subtle, right? It's very subtle. Obviously, it depends on where everyone's at. It depends on perspectives. But some of the general things, I've run a few posts about this on Perseus. Is some of the main things is you get people who gets, let's go through a few. So you get people who get stuck on exercises for years. Okay, so number of reasons. They read the exercise, goes in, brain adds a whole load of extra things, tries to do the extra things, can't do it because they weren't doing the original exercise. Then they go back and read the book and they go, oh, actually, I was understanding it wrong. So then this can happen for years. Just clarity on what is actually required, not what your brain thinks should be required. Because if any of this stuff was supposed to take 25 years, it wouldn't be in step one. So that's what a lot of people get stuck on. So really be clear on what the results should be and what makes sense. Another one would be, I get so many emails, and what happens after death? What happens here? What happens there? I don't know. Yeah, it's like don't look to someone on the internet to there's got to be self-responsibility in this stuff. If we're going to have self-responsibility in anything, it should be this, right? So don't expect someone to give you all the answers. They're going to give you all the tools, but don't put all your hope on another human being to answer all your questions, because you might get lucky, like we did in working with someone like Mark, the first time you start asking these questions. But more often than not, you're going to get someone who's, and this is the most dangerous, I think, is someone who thinks they're doing you a favor, who thinks they've got all the answers, who thinks they're kind, who thinks they've got God's will and that they're giving it to you. But again, it's just all belief. And they're going to lead you down a garden path. So what I say, I think I wrote this in one of my articles, is that you often see intelligent, talented individuals slowly give over their decision making to a spiritual teacher in things that have nothing to do. So they're asking the teacher what job they should get, what should they do with this, what should they do with that. Well, it's got nothing to do with the apparent skills of that teacher. What's that? I've got one from Martin here. Pardon does, of course, suggest the answer to things like exactly, yeah. As Martin said there, come to the yeah. And again, I'm not going to say I know. I'm going to say I've got my subjective experience, but I'm not going to put my subjective experience upon a student, because then that becomes something they think they've got to check off. Someone explains or defines an experience, and I think Ron did this in a few answers. Of course, Ron's wonderful, but when I was going through, I think, what was it? It was transplant of consciousness in a Baden companion. Someone asked, "How do I know when I've truly done it?" And Ron said, "You'll know." And it was like, will you? Well, you knew, but will the student know? We all interpret these things, and then that becomes a block and an expectation. So self-responsibility is a huge one for this stuff. And I think another thing, my last thing I'll say before I move on, is that whatever you're discussing and talking and reading about all this stuff, you should be practicing twice as much as what you're reading, twice as much as what you're thinking about this stuff. Whereas I see it's quite the opposite in many cases. 15, 20 minutes practice, 2 hours reading, and 4 hours Facebook arguing. So, you know, so, because a lot of this stuff, when practice is put as the primary thing, and, obviously life gets busy, things happen. I'm certainly not as consistent or as putting in as many hours as I was, but I try to, and I know early on, it was very, very consistent. And a lot of my answers, you get clarity through doing the work. You do something for an hour a day for 2 weeks, and you've pretty much clarified. If you're doing 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, it's hard to build up that effort, that work time to get your answers. So, yeah, practice, double what you're thinking about, what you're theorizing about. I think that would be the biggest thing. Yeah. And I'll leave it there and give some time for everyone else.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you, James. It was a great response. And thank you to everyone in the chat. I see we've got a couple of questions rolling in. Please keep them coming. Now, James, you're going to turn into a pumpkin shortly. So we want to make sure that we give a...
all through this, the dog has been looking at me going, I want to walk. I want to go out. I want to play.
All right, so let's just do. So what's coming up for Perseus?
Oh, I've got news. I do have news. So I've been tinkering. I'm a wannabe coder. So I've been working on a little app which is going to be coming out next week. As soon as I figure out the next part, I've got to work it out first. That'll be coming out next week, which is it's a journal, it's a meditation app, it's a breathing app. It's all saved locally, so there's no worries about confidentiality or anything like that. All the data is on your browser, on your device. And this is the first of many little experiments that I'm going to be putting out in terms of apps, which will get more sophisticated as we go. So next week that will go out. So have a tinker, have a play with that. On screen here is the community. The community, as I say, it's going well. We have some wonderful posts, wonderful discussions in the public groups, and we have some really serious discussions in the private groups. Added to this, we'll soon have the courses actually on this platform, and we'll also have basically check-ins and private one-on-ones also on this platform as well. So yeah, this is developing. On top of that, we have, as Bob mentioned, we have updates to the master course coming, some very exciting updates. And we also have, 3 new teachers coming to Perseus in 2026.
Wow, sounds like it's all go. Perseus, thank you so much for your work, sir. Thank you for helping to bring these teachers together and give them an ability to sort of share their knowledge, their wisdoms, and that. I personally met plenty of musicians that were terrible businessmen and were never going to become teachers because they didn't have the chops, and I met plenty of good businessmen that wanted to be musicians but needed to play more. And so, sometimes presenting the platforms and the ability for people to learn can help them to get to where they need to be. And I think a lot more teachers probably need to be doing this full time because they haven't necessarily tapped their teaching potential yet. So I am personally very grateful for what you do,
Well,
James. Thank you so much. I'm going
thank
to
you,
say,
Phil. I want to say before I go, thank you, Phil. Thank you for your support and for having me on the Bardin, and for having me on your Substack as well. It's nice to share, and yeah, it's we're all in this together. I think we all can benefit each other. It's a big enough space for us all to succeed, and for all the students to succeed as well. And I think these are great. So yeah, I think I'm very grateful to be part of these, and let's hope 2026 is even better.
thank you so much. I appreciate you, sir. You have a beautiful day. Enjoy taking the dog for a walk.
I've got to walk the
And
dog now.
it's pretty late, isn't it? Yeah. All right, then. Stay well, James. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Bye bye.
Bye, James.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Okay, let's see. Okay. All right, everyone. So now we have another guest ready to join us. So I'm going to bring forward Mr. Clint Sabom from ClintSabom.com.
Clint.
Hello, Clint. Great to see you, brother. How are you?
Hey, good to see you. Good to see all of you. Good to be here today. I send my blessings for everybody here, everybody watching. I bless you.
Thank you, bro. What a wonderful introduction. And it's always wonderful to have you here, Clint. And we're sort of halfway through a question here, so I'm just going to actually, I'm going to throw you straight into it, Clint, and then I'm going to pass it to Bob and Didi and Armand. And so the question I've got for you, sir, is actually the question I've got for you is how are you and what's been going on? Just quickly.
Oh, okay. That's good. That's good intro. I've been looking at doing other things in addition to Barden, and now all my classes on Perseus Arcane Academy are free. I have a class on steps 1, 2, and 3. I have a class on steps 4, 5, and 6. I have an emotional release class. And you can also find all of those you can find the Barden stuff on my YouTube page, and you can find the emotional release material on the front page of my website, ClintSabom.com. So, yeah, I've been looking at emotional release. I feel like a lot of clients have come to me and they've had mental health problems to some degree. I mean, it's interesting how people can get into magical work and kind of have psychological hangups. Obviously, Barden talks about some of these in the Soul Mirror, but I've learned there's deeper ways to release pent up feelings, pent up trauma, so that you can fully feel everything from head to feet. You won't just feel things in your head, like you're always in your skull or something. You'll feel them in your whole body, and my emotional release material does that. And so I'm happy to help people with that. And I'm also still doing transmissions, a lot of individual transmissions, sometimes group transmissions, where I transmit energy to folks. And it's surprising how well it works. I'm sometimes shocked. I'm like, what am I actually doing? And then have
Yeah.
they'll have visions, and then they'll see colors, or then they'll feel this deep peace, and it's just like, okay, well, I'm doing something right, so I'll keep doing it.
Man, I hear you on that. I'm sure that many energy healers have ever like gone, I don't know about remote healing. As soon as they try it and they start getting results and these types of things, it's like it's fine if people are in front of me, but as soon as they're on the other side of the world, nah, this can't be real. And it's like you said, we don't necessarily know, but it's very curious. Now,
Yeah. I had this one guy come to me. I've had several people come to me wanting remote healings where they didn't need to book a Zoom call because they were in an odd time zone that didn't work for either of us. And I did the remote healings and they felt great. And so it's interesting how that was able to work. Obviously, seeing a name, knowing a name, or seeing a picture of them, and getting a kind of rundown of their basic situation, that does help. And they usually give me all of that. So I do some remote healings too. You don't need to book a session. Just go to my website and contact me or email me at thegraveyardcowboy@gmail.com.
wonderful. Thank you. Well, with that said, because you are actively sort of working with people, the question that I brought up that we'll continue with here is, as after sort of 10 years teaching students as a music teacher, there were a lot of sort of the same things that came up, a lot of the same issues, whether it was posture, attitude, desire to practice, fluctuating, whether it was, I don't know, part of the job of the teacher was to sort of help the students to when they got stuck, and so I really just wanted to bring this up because the large majority of people that come on are going to be teaching in some form or another. And so, sometimes the students don't know what might be coming up. And in some cases, they're not going to know. It's going to be their special situation to overcome. But we can certainly share with them some insights about what they might come across. And so, Clint, what are some common pitfalls or traps for students that you've come across in your time as a teacher?
Well, there's one major pitfall, and it's basically about living in the world, just living in the world day to day and living in the socioeconomics of whatever world or dimension you're in, going to work, having relationships. I mean, most of the people that I come across usually have issues like that they're working out. And sure, we talk about spiritual practices, but the big challenge is just living in the world day to day and getting through stuff, I think. So that's the biggest challenge, not the magical work, the non-magical work. Oh, well, I guess every moment of every day can be magical work if you approach it from the right state of mind. But yeah, that's the common pitfall I find, living in the world and getting by day to day, and all of the vicissitudes of life that happen.
Wonderful, thank you. That's a very grounded and helpful response. I'm sure a lot of people, there'll be a resonance of like, yeah, that's me. So thank you for that, Clint. A great start. Bob, have you got something you'd like to chime in on as far as what are some common pitfalls or traps for students?
First thing, excellent points all around. Piggybacking on Didi. As much as I'd like to have a student come to me to learn magic because they want to find God, they always come to me because they've got a problem they need to solve and they're stuck. And that goes right into what Clint said about the real challenge is how do you engage with the world in a productive manner? How do you engage with the world in a way that benefits not just you, but other people too? So, you're not in your grandmother's basement conspiracy theory thread hijacking all over the internet all day long. But no, the only thing I'll add to that is the charitable side of my personality would say the following: mastery without metrics is meaningless. A huge problem with a lot of learning systems is they don't metric when you're good to go to the next stage. You know, vacuity of thought, master it. Okay, what does that mean? Vacuity of thought for 5 minutes. Okay, great. Now I've got something I can concretely go, all right, I met the metric. Now I can move on to the next thing. The not so charitable side of my personality says the same phrase a different way, which is mastery without metrics is marketing. And this also goes back to points folks here have brought up, where there are some wonderful, great teachers out there that want the very best for their students. Those folks, in my experience, are in the minority. For a lot of people, this is a business. And, you know, in China, for example, traditionally, with a lot of esoteric systems, one guy or one gal got the whole system. Everybody else got bits and pieces of it. Why? Well, that way someone could make a living at it. But if you weren't that one guy or one gal, you know, what does that mean for you? Right? You know, so the metricing of what you're doing is important. Now, again, like we talked about earlier, some people are going to get there relatively quickly for a variety of reasons. Other people, it's going to be real hard. I mean, I've said this publicly. My clairvoyance is not the best. It's functional. But it took me years of work to be able to do things that my more gifted friends could do in a matter of weeks. Likewise, my transmission ability is pretty good, you know. And the more ethereal people who have better out-of-body skills, for example, tend to have a real hard time with that. You know, transmitting power to other people is not easy for them. So again, nobody is going to be a master of everything. It's too wide an endeavor for that to be the case. You're going to have things you're good at. You're going to have things, okay, I'm competent at. And then you're going to have things that you just really struggle with. Being honest about that with your students so they have realistic expectations is really important. And that goes back again to going, all right, these are the metrics to be able to do it. It's not to say you can't be better than that, right? But this is where people get held up on various steps for years because they're trying to master something, and there's no real clear definition of what that means. Yeah, so it's, then again, guys, we're handicapped by the fact that there's no chi meter out there where I can go, oh, your vital force is an 8.7 today, man. Yesterday it was a 5.2. What happened? You know, so everything's a little subjective anyway, right? Yeah. You know, and all of us have had those days where we went in and we were just loaded, and then you did the session and nothing happened. Or other days, like you guys were talking about, you go in, everything's flat, and the people in the class are just having all these amazing experiences, and you're like, great. You know, 'cause, you know, my favorite one, and I'll stop here, you know, but I once paralyzed a group of hippies on a rooftop in Sayulita, Mexico, doing a 4-letter combination for Earth Element, right? It was just crazy. You know, spirits were showing up. The building was shaking. I mean, everything, right? Guys, I couldn't repeat that on demand to save my life. It's just, for whatever reason that day, everything worked. I'm honest about that. Hey, it was a good day, right? Not naming names. We all know people out there would be like, oh, yes, I am the master. Yeah, this is blah, 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 blah. You know, when in fact, you know, it was the right time of year, it was the right hour of the whatever, and, you know, I don't know. You know, so, again, mastery without metrics doesn't mean a whole lot. Because, again, it's all subjective on a certain level anyway. You know, Clint's a little different because he's had some luck, you know, setting stuff on fire and making things immobile and business, so I tip my hat to that. But, yeah, man, it's for a lot of this stuff, if you can't define what it is you're supposed to be doing as the end state, it just confuses people, and particularly in the beginning. And guys, we're all beginners sometime. You know, it's all super confusing until it becomes very clear. So, and that's one of the things I owe Mark, because I'd had great training over a 30-year period before I met him, but there'd never been a system to it. He was the first guy who sat me down and went, okay, you do this and then this happens. This is the definition for what this is. Whereas previously, and I'm sure a lot of people here can comment on this, you had great teachers, they'd show you how to do a thing and be like, okay, go practice. So, okay, you practice and you can do it. But you're going, where does this fit into everything else? Is this even good for me? I don't know. So that kind of structure makes it much easier to progress very, very quickly when it's there. And I remember once I did an entire weekend-long seminar on astral and mental level Fajen. Where you hold your hands, a few centimeters away from the guy and you make him move, right? I had no idea what that was at the end of the weekend or what I should actually use it for. So it wasn't until I ran into Mark where he's like, no, it's this, this, and this. And it's like, oh, okay, now I know why I would want to do that. Whereas previously it was just another weird trick. And it's hard to justify practice time if you don't know where it's going. So anyway, yeah, metrics in terms of practice are super important. But again, you can't do it in a way where you cage the development of the student. So it's not 100%. You got to leave room in there for, as everyone said, for the student being able to do things that you can't, because they're different than me, right? Your guy's background in music is going to have a very different approach to the letters of the Kabbalah than I'm going to have, because I don't know anything about music, right? Whereas a guy who's very good at out-of-body stuff like Andre is going to have a much more visionary approach to things than, say, someone like me who really struggles with that. That's what it's going to be. So, anyway, thanks for letting me kind of ramble. I don't know.
You're most welcome, brother. I appreciate the response. I think this is useful for people who are watching, especially those watching afterwards who might watch the clipped version. So, when I joined a small teaching school, that was when we introduced rubric type metrics of you would basically have different levels of skill demonstration, and that's the kind of the report card we would give back to the parents so they could see where the student was measuring up, because how do you gauge what progress is? And like you said, it's in the nature of what we're talking about, there is some objective metrics, but largely this adventure is it's going to be subjective. So you've got to have your own sort of internal systems or methods of monitoring and evaluating what even is progress on this. So I think time-based things, being able to do something, I think that's the fact that Barton introduces that pretty early on in the book. But you're right, using vague terms like mastery and things like that, it needs to be specific. Because that word could mean so many different things to different people. Now, Didi and Armand, we'll go with Armand to start with. What could you comment on as far as what are some common pitfalls or traps for students?
It's almost hard to add to what's already been said, because I so agree with everything. It's I think one important thing is that people who grow up in a school system, which I didn't like, but tend to have a feeling as like, is this correct? Should it be like this? Should it go like that? Is what But I think we all learn differently. We have different ways of some people are good at this, some good at that. So I think everyone should start to learn what their specific way of learning is. And of course, there's in this path there are specific things that are sort of they need to be in place for to go somewhere. But it's more that feeling that I see sometimes with students, like, oh, is this correct? So they give their power a little bit away, which is understandable when you don't know that much yet. But the thing is, they also have to learn how to trust their own internal tuning fork for what resonates with them in their unique journey and where it is they want to go at that point. And just like Clint said, most people that I teach, they have problems in life, right? They have problems out there. They have problems with their energy, how to navigate that in the energy around them, and how to deal with that. So they have things that they want to move beyond, right? And so when you start looking at the training as a sort of like 1, 2, 3, 4, like that, it can be, very distracting too. So getting to the core of what it is that you want to do is, I think, crucial. But that's a development too. We have to learn to trust also that internal tuning fork. I think that's very important. That's one thing. The other thing is that don't push your training forward. It's not like, because life happens right now. So you can always be aware right now. So I think a lot of people take, that I've met too, is like they sort of put on the training jacket and then put it in the corner in the rest of their day. And I'm like, don't do that. If you want to make real progress, you have to realize that we have to cross that bridge, that you are energy. It's not something that you have. You don't have a life. You are life right now. So you have always a choice to, choose the state. What is the state right now? And live the practice, right? Instead of something like, that's a major one, and it helped me a lot when I started to cross that bridge and looked at a training like that. It's like I'm a living process, right? So the pitfall, that's a big pitfall. So they always push the results in the future. That I know these people, instead of like, wait a minute, I can choose that result that I desire so much right now by switching my state. Boom. Right? And of course, underneath, we're working on what is causing that this state comes up that is not so desirable, right? So, and that's also the thing, is that the pitfall can be is that you turn too narrow in this, right? There's other stuff out there that you can learn and trust, that you can bring into what you already know and bring that into the practice as well. So these are some of these aspects that I see a lot with students, that when we can tackle these, if you will, you see the progress go like this. It's like, oh, wait a minute, now I can start trusting the inside. What is calling to me in this practice? And yeah, it's this. And okay, so now how does the training line up for you specifically in this situation? Right? How does it line up? What element is your thing? Or when we look at the soul mirror, where is your thing? And then how do we bring this all together so that it supports your specific journey, right? Instead of looking at outside yourself, looking for some. Well, the thing is, Phil, what I try to say here is, some people might train this out of interest, if you will, but not my students. They don't. I see them. They train not for interest. They train for life, for deeper understanding, for their own unique problems, for they're sort of desperate, you could say, in some sense, to make sense and get meaning out of this whole thing that we call life, and who they are and what they are. So yeah, these are some of the things that I see, and I help people cross quickly. And I'm lucky that I want to say this, last thing I say about it is that the teachers I had stimulated this sort of thought too, so they also helped me to sort of become more self-confident in what I was feeling around this, right? Instead of waiting for sort of permission to take that next step to that, or no lie, just read the book, underline what resonates, line up the practice, and there you go. Like, oh, really? This is not what I was taught in school, right? This is different. So, yeah. So I hope this helps.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that, brother. Didi, have you got anything you'd like to chime in with what are some common pitfalls or traps for students? I know that, you have a background in some other disciplines as well. And so, anything you can share on this very general question would be lovely. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm like thinking about something that isn't said before, but one of the things I was thinking about is like what I see happening, that people come in and they're like, yes, I want to do this. I'm up for it. And they just, especially when I do stuff with food, they think, okay, I'm going to change my life, basically. And then they go all in. And after like 2 weeks, they're on a dead end. And then they stop. And I'm like, okay, why not try it with a little bit more moderation in the beginning? Just, start with little steps and then see results, and then go a little bit further and add to that, instead of throwing everything in and then just stop. So sometimes yeah, I see that happening quite a lot, that they want to make that big shift, and so yeah,
Crash.
and crash. And then it's also the same with workouts. You see that happening a lot. They all we're coming to the end of the year, so 1st of January, we're all starting, get a new membership, do the workout, and then after 2 weeks it's all empty. And so yeah, it's like, okay. And also check your motivation. So I love people to, because this is also something that I see a lot, is that people forget about the things why they start when it's solved. So, for example, somebody comes in with a problem and you give them tips and they start applying, and it actually helps them and it stops. And now, as yeah, they kind of feel that the motivation to do it is kind of gone, which is a pity, actually. Because there's so much more to continue going. And so yeah, it's, how do you keep on the path for a long time, keep yourself motivated? See, I love to um, write down your results as well and celebrate, but then continue and see what else is there, and to get new goals and measure. And yeah, so that's a different point.
Sounds like
Yeah,
kung fu, right?
yeah,
Slow little steps, and then
yeah, yeah.
cool.
So,
Like that.
and I also agree with everyone else. I
Hmm.
I see, yeah, life. So what Clint said was like bang
Yeah.
on.
Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, I think these perspectives are valuable because, like, it's one thing about getting a student to progress on a particular sort of like learning pathway, and then there's the sort of the underlying, what they bring from home or what's not right at home that can be getting in the way of their development. This is something I think, everyone could sort of relate to at some form or another. Now, we've reached the, thank you, everyone. That was a great set of responses. Now, we've reached the 90-minute mark. I'm good to carry on for a bit longer. I just wanted to see if the guests wanted to stick around for a bit longer. I've got some more, we've got some questions. Thank you. We've got some questions from the audience here. And so these will be, just jump in if you want. We'll start with Bob on this one. Bob, this question is in regards to aphantasia, which is, basically like a cognitive sort of lack of being able to visualize with the mind's eyes. I'm sure you could probably articulate a little bit better. But the question is from T. Schmidt. What advice do you have for people with aphantasia, the lack of a visual imagination, on their initiation path?
One of the things that became very apparent within the last year or two is that the more traditional Hermetic schools in Europe, for example, relied upon a lot of alchemical pharmacopoeia for the development of things like clairvoyance and clairaudience. I'm not going to go so far as to say these groups were lying about that, but they weren't being very open about how much they were depending upon spagyrics and alchemically charged compounds to break open those subtle senses. So, what I would say is that part in the back of Barton's first book where he gets into the fluids for eye, for subtle sense of sight and subtle sense of hearing, that's real important stuff. The other thing I would say is charging things and then consuming them with affirmations like I am clairvoyant or various elemental energies to enhance those subtle sight and subtle sense gates. Very helpful for somebody who's not naturally. And the problem with this is most of your better, rephrase that, a lot of your more well-known teachers historically were people who were naturally clairvoyant or clairaudient, or for whom it required very little training. So, jokingly, we all hate those people. It's like the gal or the guy walking around who are eating ding dongs and ho hos and Fritos all day long, and they have a perfect six pack because they have the carbohydrate metabolism from hell, and the rest of us are like starving ourselves for weeks at a time just to get a little bit of an outline. Right. Unfortunately, life is unfair. And so if you're not naturally gifted at something, you're going to have to work twice as hard. But this is where the teachers who had to work twice as hard to get it themselves end up being the better teachers because they know about the work part of the equation. You look at pro sports, your best coaches for teams were guys who just barely made it into the league because they have to be able to explain what to do. Whereas the person who's just naturally gifted, they just show up and it's time to perform, right? So, that's, yeah, man, if you got problems with this naturally, you're going to have to work twice as hard. But definitely look into the fluids and alchemical approaches to aid that development. Because I'm here to tell you that stuff gets used a lot more often than you think. So, for what it's worth.
Wonderful, thank you. Would anyone else in the panel like to comment on aphantasia or how to get it? Yep, Armand.
Well, maybe it can also help to tune into energy. When you're doing this stuff, it really helped me to tune into the vital energy force, to start building the feeling around it, and also maybe focus on something where there's a very positive emotional charge around the thing you try to, or the maybe the person you try to imagine. So, like, let's say your mother or a loved one. But adding the feeling of energy really worked for me to do that. So it's there's when feeling comes in, there's just a different state of presence. So that's just a small thing that I would like to add to that. Maybe that could be helpful. Really helped me tons. Yeah.
Wonderful. Anyone else? Nope.
Well, I could say a few things like, well, first of all, I just want to say, because I know we're kind of, towards the end of time here, I feel a very peaceful presence coming through, since I joined this. So whatever you all are doing, keep doing it, like, I mean, maybe it's some people watching, I don't know. But yeah, my clairvoyance is something I turned off. Yeah, it was too much to deal with. It was just too much. I didn't really need it. I didn't really want it. Visualization is hard. But again, there's lots of things like 60 Skills said earlier. There's things we're good at and things we're not so good at. And the same is true with me, and the same is going to be true with students. So if there's things you're not so good at, I just wouldn't let it stop you doing other things too. I mean, there's just so much richness in the world of spirituality. There's so many paths to choose from, and so many practices in so many different traditions. So, if one thing doesn't work, maybe others will. That would be what I would say, just naturally. Maybe that's a heretical answer to just say don't worry about it, but that's kind of what I want to say.
No, that's all good. Yeah, I think you just kind of got to get real with where you're at too, right? I mean, we have a lot of issues in modern society that weren't around at the turn of the century. There's a lot of new things that are making it harder for us to do stuff that was easier to do a long time ago. And so, yeah, I think just being a little kind with yourself and going, okay, like, like I've got a great ear because I've been a musician. It's easy for me to tune into certain things, but my visualization, I mean, that just takes more effort for me because I've watched a lot of movies and I've played a lot of games and I've read a lot of books and I've written a lot of stories and all that. But until I actually sit down and start organizing my exercises and becoming hyper focused, I've got to take it to that length, and that's fine. That's fine. I got to say, there's nothing like, imagine if you landed here on Earth and you'd already climbed all the mountains and it's like, well, what's there to do? I guess we could just show others. I mean, it's got to be interesting for everyone, right? Like, there's got to be a few challenges left in life. Okay, everyone. Well, I've got another question here from the chat. Now, this one's from Will, and when I read the Kabbalion, I keep seeing the Taiji yin-yang symbol. Now, I haven't read the Kabbalion for a while. I don't recall seeing the yin-yang symbol in it, and I'm presuming that he's referring to a particular edition or something. I'll just put this to any of the guests who want to answer. Is there a historical link from Egypt to China, Hermetics to Taoism? If anyone wants to see if they can answer this.
I can give a little bit of light on this. Little bit. And it doesn't go quite as far as China, but if you look at the mind training techniques in Hermetics, Raja Yoga, and Tibetan Buddhism, they're all exactly the same. So those three things, Hermetics, Raja Yoga, and Tibetan Buddhism, I view as kind of magical cousins. Who influenced who, hard to say. When Pythagoras' temple got sacked and all of his followers headed east, they wound up in northern India probably. But the thing I want people to keep in mind is movement in the ancient world of people was more common than a lot of historians would like you to think. Now, it was slow, which meant when people went places, they were there for a while. And people forget there was a Buddhist temple in Athens at one point. And a lot of Greeks converted to Buddhism along the Silk Road. So the fact that there might have been some kind of communication between the two groups doesn't surprise me. I've seen no historical proof of that. But keep in mind, and this is an example I like to use, the original source documents for ancient Greek literature, not a book where it included a passage from another book, but the actual original stuff we have hard copies of, fills 2 small shelves on a bookcase. That's it. There's a whole lot of things that went on in the past that we don't have hard documentation on. Seems likely that a lot of these things occurred just because, again, the distance between Western China and Greece just isn't that far. But, as for quote unquote proof, you'd probably have to go to some kind of religious archaeologist, anthropologist to get anything approaching a good answer on that question. But there's definitely a relationship between Tibetan Buddhism, Raja Yoga, and Hermetics, for sure. And again, which direction that came in and who got what from whom.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, I've seen, photographs from archaeological digs where symbolism seems out of place. There's everything from what was it? It was a 6-pointed star with a swastika in the middle of it and on a Roman mosaic or something like this, And so there was no doubt cross-pollination of inspiration and ideas, and people were trying to seek to figure out, well, both of our civilizations are both ancient, and we seem to be able to produce some next level maguses here. So there must be some correlative, there must be some place for the Lego bricks to fit together or something like this. But would anyone else like to jump in on this one? Please, Armand.
No, it was like a no.
Oh, okay. Nope, sweet. Okay.
No. But
No.
I get what Bob is saying. I think there's so much movement's been there, and it's hard to see what's direction.
It's the
yeah.
same when you study nutritional. How do you say that?
Traditional nutrition.
Traditional nutritions. You see, if you just look at it from a kind of a distance, you see all the overlaps. You're like, okay, I see all these things that people look at. You're like, oh, there must have been some influence. And there always have been these roots through the world, like how do you call them?
The trade routes.
Trade routes.
Like the Silk routes.
So, there must have been so many influences from all these different cultures. And you see that coming back in the books and in the studies. And I think that's also a beautiful thing actually to look at. What are the overlaps from all these things? Because we can learn so much from that. Because there is a truth in there. Like if you look at, well, of course, I love food. I love all these.
Me too.
Traditional nutrition. So if you look at that, if you see that they really look at foods and how the temperature of food, they kind of categorize these foods in the same way, just through different systems. But they can. So I
like
think
China or like India, or that you see in Europe, like with Hildegard von Bingen, like in what's that, 11th century or something, talking about elements and stuff, and it's still,
it's all
up till this day,
it's a bit different, but it's still, they talk about elements, they talk about the yin yang principles. They name it different, so it's so interesting. Instead of looking at it, because we're very much nowadays looking at it as if there are borders against it or between them. But if you look at them as, okay, they're all part of a system, sometimes they try to tell a little bit a different story. But what can I see in the overlap? Because there is interesting stuff there.
Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah,
I think I've got some big hardcover books that do like an overview of like all the world's religions and all the world's, I've got this great one on astrology, divination and prophecy at the moment that it's a beautiful new Penguin book, but it's like every one of these topics is so deep, like, it's interesting. It's fun to explore, isn't it? But my gosh, that's a big rabbit hole. Now, I want to say that we've got about 17 minutes left before the broadcast ends. I've just been notified. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to flick up a quick, like a 2-minute question for everyone. And then we'll start doing the exits to tidy up the end of the stream. And what I wanted to ask everyone was, and we'll start with Didi and Armand, single book recommendations for beginners. Now, when I say this, this is probably presuming that the person has already got a copy of Initiation into Hermetics. If I just say that, is there a book you would recommend for people who've gone, okay, I'm gonna focus on this Initiation into Hermetics book, however I choose to approach it, do you have a book that you would recommend that you has found to be invaluable? Didi and Armand.
Actually, I brought it. It's always on my nightstand, so I don't know if you can read it.
The Game of Life and How to Play It by Florence
Scovel Shin, double N at the end.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's actually a very thin book,
It's that thin.
but it's lovely. It's a great book,
It's a
and it's
classic.
from, I don't know if the date is in here, but it's quite an old book. Um, and yeah, it starts with the power of the word, the law of non-resistance, the law of karma, and the law of forgiveness, casting the burden, love, intuition or guidance, perfect self-expression of the divine design, denials, and affirmations. It's actually written by a woman, so I like that. Like I see here, there are a lot of men in this world, so
Mm.
I like to bring forward something that was written by a woman. A woman, I think it's twenties.
Beginning of the 20th century, around the
Yeah,
1920s.
1920.
It's a bit around the same time I think
Yeah,
that the Kybalion came out. It's American.
yeah,
I think it's in that same sort of movement that's
yeah.
happening there. So yeah.
So it's great read. And what I do is I've read it like once, the full thing, and now I just it's on my nightstand, and sometimes I feel like, now I just need a page, and and every time I'm like, there's a great lesson in there. So yeah, I like it.
It's like a magical book, right?
Yeah,
It's this thin, but it seems that thick.
yeah,
It's like, and it grows on you too. Yeah,
yeah.
cool.
That was mine.
Yeah. So I'll have a single book recommendation, and it's maybe not what you expect, but get a notebook and a pen, charge it with your intentions, and that's the most important book you're ever going to read because it's your story, it's your journey, and it's if you continue on it, it might help a lot of people beside yourself, right? So that's the most important book of all. It's the one that you are going to write. So yeah.
Oh, I love that. That's a nice one. All right, Clint, what can you add to this one, sir? A single book recommendation for those on the initiation to Hermetics pathway.
The Power of Now. The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle.
Boom.
Yeah, it's sitting right here. Um, I mean, I have it this close to me at all times. And it is a fantastic book. I read it originally when I lived for 6 months in a silent monastery, and it was recommended to me, and it really helped me then. And I go back and reread it or read parts of it now. And I mean, honestly, this is going to sound heretical again. If you master everything in the power of now, there's no reason to do initiation into Hermetics.
Right.
You're there. You've got your spiritual enlightenment, and any magical abilities you're meant to have will come with that. But yeah, it's a fantastic book. And it's not just about living in the now, it's about all sorts of tactics to increase your spiritual presence until suffering no longer arises.
Wonderful. Thank you, Clint. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. All right, Bob, single book recommendation for beginners on the Hermetic initiation pathway.
I am going to cheat. So I'm going to give you two books. Circles of Power by John Michael Greer and Paths of Wisdom,
Oh, yeah,
because they're
nice.
actually one book. A big mistake. And yeah, okay, nerd flex here. Signed first edition because I know John. But a mistake a lot of guys from the Barden tradition make, from what I've seen, is there's only a couple thousand years of history regarding Hermetics, and a lot of these ritual magicians figured a lot of things out. We're approaching that from a different mechanism than they do, but that doesn't mean they don't have something to tell us as well, particularly regarding theory. So, Circles of Power digs into all that Golden Dawn stuff in modern language and explains exactly how they do it. Super valuable book. And Paths of Wisdom gets into all of the theory behind the Tree of Life. What the spheres do, what the individual paths do, what you're going to encounter when you're working with that stuff. And it also, both books have a lot, and this is unusual for our community, but very valuable indexes and abstracts where John tells you where he got his stuff from. So if you want to learn about, hey, these are the foundational works that, guys did, the pick a tricks, stuff like that, the books of occult wisdom, all that kind of business. There's real value in learning that stuff to know when you're engaging with these things with your subtle senses, where a lot of that came from, what other people have seen. And because a lot of these works, these source documents, are really old, it gives really valuable insight into how the Western mind approached this 200, 400, 600, 800 years ago, and kind of how we got to where we are now. Again, it's not going to help your practice any, guys. It's not going to shorten the amount of time it takes you to learn how to do one thing or another. And it's going to provide a lot of insight into where the Western mind got a hold of these concepts from and how they all kind of got put together. And so, again, without getting too long-winded into it, because of the Inquisition, Western practitioners were forced to write things down. In Asia, they largely didn't have to, because there was never a time you couldn't operate an open mystery school. We had about a 400-year period in the West where you couldn't do that. So the advantage is a lot of this theoretical information is actually written down. Whereas in Asia, it's more of a student-teacher type transmission arrangement. And again, it's not going to solve your problems, but it might provide some insight into, oh, okay, I'm working with Gabura and this happened. Or, I'm working from one level of reality to another and this happened. All right, that makes sense now. So, for what it's worth, Paths of Wisdom and Circles of Power by John Michael Greer. Great reads.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, I'm actually doing a reread of Paths of Wisdom at the moment. It's just, man, because I've read a lot of books on Tree of Life, and some of them are like mid 20th century, but
Right.
this one's just very accessible. You don't have to try and sort of be intellectually agile with lots of old school language and things. It's like, oh, the bro knows how to speak to me. He's speaking directly to me. I know he is. Yeah. So anyway, guys, well, we've pretty much hit the end of the time here, and I want to definitely do a plug for everyone. So first of all, I want to say thank you to everyone in the chat. Thank you to my wonderful guests. Thank you, Clint. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Didi and Armand. It's such a great pleasure and treasure to have you all here at this time. Trying to organize people across different time zones is always a lot of fun. But I think, because I think the streaming software is actually going to kick us all out in about 7 minutes, I'm just going to do a quick thing here, and I'm going to go like this. And I'm not going to do that one. We'll do that one another time. But basically, Didi and Armand, do you want to give us a quick 2-second plug for anything that's going on at chiskills.com at the moment?
Yeah, so we're in the plans of creating our next online course that's going to happen and will be released in the coming year. So hopefully around springtime. So we're really working on that and how to make that unique system that we're developing now into a much deeper product for that. And we're continuing with our private mentoring. So anyone interested, please contact us. We also offer the Core Essentials Qigong course, which is a foundational course for Qigong, but also serves as a great energy foundation for a lot of the Hermetic training. So we'll be getting the podcast in the air again, and just a lot of stuff. New website. Yeah, we're a mom and pop business, right? So we, we all have to do this together, right? So so some stuff doesn't go to like that. It's more a little bit linear, but so there's a lot of stuff coming, and we're very excited for it. Yeah.
So this is the old website. Couple of weeks, we'll have a new website. And but here you can still find the online course and the work with us. You can see the private mentoring if you click on that. So
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. All the details will be in the description below. Okay, let's bring on 60 skills. Now, I know, Bob, a lot of your stuff's on the Perseus site, but I'll just put this up because such a lovely view there. What's
That's
coming up for
all.
60?
And by the way, that website is all James's work. Otherwise, you'd have like a sheet of notebook paper with crayon markings on it from. Kudos to him once again. Yeah, so the infamous Zodiac course should be forthcoming relatively soon. There's going to be additions to the master course involving breath work because at a very high level, Hermetic breath retention work is very similar to Tibetan breath retention work, which is very different from the stuff out of India. So that'll be exciting. There'll be an update involving the iron triangle work because, again, as I mentioned earlier, as someone who is good at transmitting to other people, it turns out most people aren't very good at that. So having a mechanical way of walking them through how to learn that is going to be super valuable. The old Patreon videos, which were the old 60 Skills app, will be an app once more on Perseus, but that'll come a little later in the year. So that fantastic scenery from around the world and Eastern Turkey and all that will be once again available to people. And finally, the tour schedule for the next year should be out in the next week or two. It'll span between the middle of February until about the beginning of August. So if you ever wanted to meet some of the folks out there, this is a good chance to do that. And I think I've eaten up more of my time. Clint, over to you.
Yeah, go Clint.
All right. Well, I've got a book out, Panic Magic. I haven't mentioned that yet. I think if you scroll down, you can see it. There you go. New release, Panic Magic. You can buy it right there. And I have a few higher level practitioners of Barden and Hermetics, much higher than myself. And they read the book and they've read it a couple of times and absolutely love it. So it's a thriller. It's about a tormented magician. Kind of picture a broken Frabato going on a heroic journey. And it's a really good read. I mean, everybody asks me, what should we get out of it? And I'd say, just enjoy it. I think it's a good read. I'm glad I put it together. And I get a lot of compliments about it from the people that buy it. So you can just go to Amazon too, type in Panic Magic Clint Sabom, it'll come up. So yep, that's that. And very blessed to be here. My website is also James's work, so I'll give him credit for that. And yeah, so QuintSabom.com, you can find out everything I offer.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, everybody, bit of a whirlwind tidy up here, but I'm so grateful to you all. It's lovely to sort of maybe see the year out with everyone. And I'm just going to put a big thanks, everyone. Thanks, everyone in the chat. Thank you to my wonderful, lovely guests. If I could get the guests to stick around for just a minute once I close the stream. And yeah, I'm grateful to everyone. We'll definitely be chopping this video up into some smaller bits and pieces once it uploads and does all its things. I'm very lucky. I've got a friend who's going to be doing some video editing for me, so we're going to try and pretty this up and make it into a nice searchable library on the channel, which I've renamed. I've renamed the Phil Rice channel to the Barden and just stripped all my personal stuff away. So now the channel is pretty much all sort of teacher content and things like that. So once again, everyone, thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful to you all. Have a beautiful and wonderful day.
Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Phil. Thank
Thanks,
everyone.
Phil.
Nice seeing you.